They departed from the palace by sunrise. Dizzy was in his itchy red uniform and tight shiny boots. At least he would be able to get some sleep before they arrived. How far out did you say the eastern villages are? Dizzy shrugged over, pulling his red coat closer on his torso. We won't make it until closer to night. You might want to get some rest. I've got a few lessons I want you to learn before we get there. Dizzy looked over with a suspicious look on his face. What kind of lessons, Prince? There's more to the job than killing Kid. You hold that blade so close I didn't see it past your shadow. Good. That means the next person who needs it won't see it, said the boy with that haunting look in his eyes. The prince laughed, but other members in the caravan could tell the boy with the coarse hair wasn't joking. No matter. They were all killers and criminals themselves. Despite their rough imitation of palace guards, they had actually almost gotten Dizzy himself. Who's the boy, Ban? A man whose muscles grew muscles said from the back. Dizzy didn't look at him when he spoke, as he already got a good look at him on his way in. Instead he looked at the prince as if asking, who am I, Prince? Dizzy seen the panic before he sputtered out. A straggler from the east. Yeah, the kid has no parents, the truth. He didn't say anything else for the rest of the night, and the rest of the van talked for another minute or so before going lights out. Dizzy stayed up that night. Whether it was what Prince Ban said about him or the fear of being betrayed, he couldn't tell. But he couldn't close his eyes for longer than 10 minutes that night. The question he asked the prince seemed to draw back onto him as he lay up at night. Who am I? His hand tightened around the grip of his blade and his hair stood on end. He was filled with an overwhelming feeling of dread, and he felt it to the point he was shaking with fear. His hand gripped tighter and tighter around the ivory handle, and then he opened his eyes and saw a blur of blue ahead. At first it was just a faint smudge, then it stood up and began approaching. One of the old guys from the other caravan was the first to say something. Where then, almost all at once, every caravan stopped. Ban woke up and questioned the break. Dizzy's eyes never left the golden jewels that were ahead of them. Approaching quicker, on 4 legs now that it sees they've stopped. Ban's eyes searched out Dizzy's but had no luck. Then he followed his eyes to the blue blur, which filled out quite well to be Frost Giant, Ban said with a sigh on his breath. All at once, Ben reached for his 6-shooter. The giant ran through a caravan, tipping it, skidding onto its back, and Dizzy shredded out of his suit and flung himself out of the window. Mollies, one of them bellowed from their vans. Everybody scurried to get away, but nobody ran. Dizzy wondered why he hadn't just left the crew as he ran back to slash and only graze the giant. He stood stunned in the monster's midst. It swung and missed, but Dizzy's fear of being touched by the thing made him overcalculate his space. He fell to the ground and its gold jewels panged over him. He was food until Ben came to his rescue with a flaming bottle of whiskey. It shattered against the giant's chest and Ben dragged this to a safe spot. You're crazy. A little bit. What the hell is this thing? A frost giant, Ben said before snagging another one of his men from the mud. Never seen one this far away from the north. Not sure anyone has. He snapped a bandage between his teeth and ripped it off. Don't move it, he said, referring to the bandage he wrapped around the man's leg. So they are weak to fire? No, that'll only tick them off for a bit. You gotta destroy the heart. But Dizzy was gone, focused on another attack. The monster was on a rampage. While his chest was cooling down, he destroyed 2 whole caravans, flipping one flimsily onto a tree where it was still hanging. Diz spotted double muscles under a large slink of wood where he couldn't move his legs to get out. He made his way over and noticed the bones sticking out of the meat that was his legs. He grunted when he lifted the piece of wood. He held it up until the man's legs slid free. They exchanged a look, then, long enough for Diz to see the appreciation in his eyes. Then he slid his mask on and ran to the fight. Fall back, he heard Ban say somewhere behind. What about the caravans? He shouted back. They both looked at the caravans, toward where the monster was in rage. No shot, the prince said. He wanted to leave their only means of transport, storage, food, weapons and artillery for one damn frost giant. Not to mention the people inside. Diz's face became solid before sliding his mask back down. His one-sided blade flashed off the moonlight before it sank into the giant's heel. Its arm swung and Dizzy dropped in anticipation. Another swing, but from Dizzy, his blade met its knee and then its collarbone. His feet hit the ground as he recovered from his attack, but the monster didn't plan to give him time. It swings and connects, sending Dizzy shoulder first into a caravan. The pain was bleeding agony, but he got to his feet nonetheless. He reached out for his katana somewhere in the frozen leaves and found another object in its place. Rope. Better than nothing, he thought, getting himself back on his feet. "Come at me, frost freak," whispered the boy on cold, bloody lips. The giant didn't take well to insults. He roared in response, making Dizzy's blood run quicker. His pupils were dilated and his shoulder was broken for certain, but he couldn't think about anything else in the world but the monster in front of him. He spun the rope and waited for its initiation, and when it came he was ready. He rolled to one side, unbothered by the bleeding pain in his shoulder, and captured its wrist in a bout of rope. In a few swift movements the boy spun the rope around the tree, latching the giant's arm to it. It tugged for a moment until realizing it didn't need to be free to get him. It lunged to where he was, standing between two tight trees. The monster lunged and slammed himself into the cramped space. Then, he saw the milky white handle of his blade resting on the forest floor. He grabbed it and shook the leaves off that were sticky with blood. He eyed those golden jewels one last time before sinking his blade deep into its chest and into its frozen heart. Its eyes died out and its heavy arms lost weight, then it fell all at once into a cloud of snow. Dizzy still had never seen anything like it. Now suddenly his mask grew heavy, and his arms too. The pain in his shoulder was recognizable now that the threat was gone and his adrenaline was spent. The last thing he seen when he turned around was the group of sorry criminals the prince had put together and the people whom he'd just put his life on the line for. They seen a cursed child with more wits than he had any rights having. His mask dipped to the side first and then the rest of him went down as well. Ban was used to being shocked in his line of work, but this was a million volts of electricity. The prince and a few others helped the boy to a comfy bed and some medication. They figured there wouldn't be much hard of sleeping there for the night. The threat was neutralized. Sometime early in the morning the loud pounding of a caravan hitting the forest floor would wake everyone up.